And welcome back, everyone, to the Speed Rain Supreme podcast. I'm Alex Gray, along with Michael Klein, and we're just getting started here on this podcast. We had kind of our introductory episode of what we want to do with the podcast. You can check out our previous episode where we talked to Tim Goulet of Rise Motorsports in the ARCA Menard series, episode number 00, and this is episode 1. And today we have somebody else in the ARCA scene with us. We have driver Presley Sorah here joining us. Presley, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. And obviously, what I like to do to start out with a guest is just introduce yourself, what got you into racing, and what's your racing background been like?
Yeah, so my name is Presley Sorah. I am 20 years old. I'm from Cambridge City, Indiana. I currently race in the ARCA Menard series. I've raced for Fast Track Racing this year and Club Racing Inc. And I tested for Wayne Peterson Motorsports back in Daytona in January. And I grew up, I raced go-karts when I was 10 years old. So that's what I started out in. And I raced soapbox derby cars as well. And after that, didn't really have a great method of moving up the ladder because it's obviously so expensive, as you guys know. So I moved into sim racing. And after 4 or 5 years of pro sim racing, since really back to 2018, I got some opportunities to race in real life with Blaster Motorsports last year in a late model and used my experience from that and started in the ARCA scene this year.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's like I remember I think we first met a couple years ago at IRP when I was still working with Club, and it's just seeing how far you've come since then is really crazy to see, just to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been pretty incredible over the last few years, the growth, and I don't think it's anything that I could have imagined it would have been, and definitely not what anyone else could have imagined it would have been for me.
Yeah, it's great to see you get all these kinds of different opportunities, and of course, running in ARCA. Kind of like what we talked about in the previous episode is, these kinds of different racers from different backgrounds, and especially like it's like grassroots racing on a national level and racing on all kinds of different tracks. You talk about, of course, Tim's talking about how ARCA West is racing at the Tri-City Raceway out in Washington State. And then there's tracks like IRP. Then there's tracks like Michigan or Daytona and Charlotte and just all sorts of different tracks that ARCA is able to race on.
Yeah, I think that's what's great about ARCA because, I mean, you'll see us at a local level short track that hosts, street stocks, Crown Vics, late models on a Saturday night, and then the next week we'll be running Talladega. And I think that that's so unique for us. Most other racing series are pretty status quo with what they do. I mean, you have variety as far as like, ovals or street tracks or road courses. But as far as like the jump from a local level scene to a national, I feel like ARCA is really unique in that aspect because we do both throughout the entire year.
Yeah, I know this may sound a little cliche to say, but ARCA definitely has the most diverse schedule out of any racing series I know. Because, like you said, we go from Daytona, we go to Elko, we go to the dirt tracks at Springfield, we have the road courses of Mid Ohio and Watkins Glen. I mean, this is a place really where I think you could become well-rounded as a racer.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why so many drivers that are currently racing in the top series of NASCAR have come through ARCA when they were in their early stages of their career because, it's kind of a proving ground and it gets you really good experience with, a NASCAR stock car at NASCAR level tracks.
Yeah, I agree. And pretty much on the dot there. I think you're able to become more of a well-rounded racer, and I think it's a great way to develop because you're just getting a little bit of everything and getting as much experience as you can with all the different tracks.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, really ARCA is the closest you're going to get to racing in one of NASCAR's top three national series. So the fact that you can run a very, very, very similar car at the exact same tracks that you're watching on a Sunday, I think that's incredible. And especially for us young drivers, like, I mean, for me, I mean, I'm only 20 and, I just remember just a few years ago watching the Cup race on TV and thinking it was just impossible to even get anywhere close to that. And, here I am just a few years later and I'm running on the same tracks that the Cup Series guys are on Sundays.
Yeah, exactly. And you also mentioned your sim racing, and kind of tell us, especially in more recent years, it seems like sim racing has also been helping developing drivers and getting a feel for certain racetracks. How do you feel like sim racing has been influence or has been an influence on developing drivers?
Well, it's still on the up, and I feel like a lot of the drivers right now that you're seeing do the sim to reality movements, which I push a lot on my social media pages, they've been like it's been a work in making. So I mean, like me, Raja, Donovan Strauss, we've all come up at a pretty similar time, and obviously Raja's gotten the furthest of all of us so far, but um, we've got a pretty similar timeline, and we all started on the sim with really no real life experience whatsoever. So I think obviously the COVID years really helped as far as getting the iRacing stuff the exposure that it needed. And then with that, it really shined a big spotlight on us iRacing drivers to really show that, we have talent and, giving us a shot in a real car, it's something worth testing because just a few years ago, nobody really knew what that was going to do. I feel like a lot of people looked down on it and thought, well, that's just a video game. You're not going to be as good or even good at all in real life once you hop in the real thing. And, there's several of us that have proved that, it is possible to make that transition. And, I'm still working on it and I'm just going to get better and better with each race I run. And I'm really excited for the sim racing future because stuff like this is just going to be more and more common. We're just the pioneers of it.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's just crazy how close iRacing has gotten to the real thing. Because, I tested with Rise last year at Hickory Motor Speedway, and so I used the iRacing to kind of train myself for that. And to be honest, the similarities I felt in the handling of the car on the sim versus what I felt, in real life, honestly astounded me. I mean, I didn't think it was going to be that close.
Yeah, and really for me, it's best just for visuals. I know that like I drove out on the pit road at Daytona in the test earlier this year, and it felt like I'd already done it before because I'd run so many laps there on the sim, and visually it's identical pretty much. So I feel like that really helps prepare a driver for an upcoming race, and then just getting used to racing, just a competitive manner. I mean, it's the same mannerisms and same inputs you're doing with the wheel and pedals and everything. So that aspect is the same. So I feel like running laps on the sim, I mean, I can't imagine trying to run an ARCA car right now at my current state if I hadn't run years of simulator racing before it. So I think it's definitely helped me, and I think it'll definitely continue to help people in the future.
Yeah, I agree. It's been amazing because I hear Rick Allen in my head right now going, William Byron, whose career started on a computer, or something like that. Because you look at guys like him too, and even Timmy Hill, and all these different racers who have gotten assistance from simulators like iRacing. And even when I started doing it a few years ago, and yeah, it was because of the pandemic and everything else. Um, I was truly amazed of how realistic things felt. I remember when I first tried the Chicago street circuit, because I was testing it because this one league I was in at the time was running the trucks there. My claim to fame was getting a top 10 in that race. I was truly amazed with how bumpy it was. I'm like, wow, this is unlike any other like playing a. This is different than just playing a console game, and this is no video game. It's a simulation. There's a reason why it's called a simulation, but I think it has truly helped a lot of racers out there.
Yeah, I agree. And they're just continuing to work on it too, so it's only going to get more realistic. And I mean, the whole sim racing scene hasn't really been around for that long if you really think about the timeline of it.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine 10, 20, 30 years in the future how advanced it's going to be. And I mean, I would imagine it's going to be almost dead on to the real thing.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
yeah, it is
Yeah, I mean,
crazy.
it's crazy how far it's come because, I remember, way back when I was probably 17, 18, and I would get with my Florence Speedway buddies on R Factor, just seeing how far it's come since then has just been crazy.
Yeah, and just like I've seen stories shared of guys dating back to when they were doing this in NR 2003, right? And this stuff has come a long way for sure, from NR 2003 to R Factor to everything else. And you know, iRacing's an example, and of course, you know, Gran Turismo had that movie last year, talked about the story of the driver that did all the racing in Gran Turismo and then became an actual race car driver. So it's just really cool to look back on that and how fast this stuff has evolved over time. And like Presley said, it's only going to continue to evolve more and more and more. So who knows what this is going to look like in 5, 10, 15 years, and it could become a whole new way of drivers to develop themselves in a way. Obviously, there's all sorts of different ways, which is what makes racing so cool, is that there's just so many different types of sanctions out there, from late models to dirt racing, stock cars, open wheel sports cars. There's just so much of it out there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy that I can be hopefully a role model for some sim racers out there that, I feel like just a few years ago, no one thought that something like what me or Raja or Donovan Strauss are doing is possible. And I'm happy that I can be one of those few early ones that can show that it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, kind of going from the sim racing aspect to the real world aspect of it. So we know a couple years ago you started to sort of transition more to the real world side of racing. Could you describe what that process was like?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely tough at first. I mean, iRacing is great. It helps phenomenally, but it's not one to one by any means. So, there is a learning curve there, and especially with just some of the little technical tidbits. I mean, just getting your belts on, getting in the car, getting the radio hooked up and going, just stuff like that, even like away from the driving aspect, stuff like that is really important, and it's not something that you have to do on the sim. So, those little intricacies, those are the biggest learning curves at the beginning. And then obviously when you go out there, you've got all the effects on you of the downforce and the heat of the car and everything like that. So stuff like that, the simulator just can't replicate, unfortunately. And hopefully in the future it can, and I'm sure there's maybe some really expensive ones out there that can currently, but um, stuff like that, that was my biggest issue and hurdle that I had to jump over at first. But I feel like this year with the ARCA stuff, I've really honed in on that, and I'm completely comfortable behind the wheel of an ARCA car, and I feel like honestly, I've almost done more real life racing this year than I have sim racing, so I kind of borderline feel more comfortable in an ARCA car right now than I do on the sim.
Oh yeah, I've always kind of felt like I'm more comfortable behind the wheel of a real car than I am, behind the wheel of a sim. I know it's kind of weird to say, but it's just having that real life feel to it, I think just kind of creates a bigger comfort level than, just being on a sim like that.
Yeah, I agree. And the biggest thing is in real life you have the seat of the pants feel that you don't get on iRacing. So I know that that's one of the biggest things that a driver that's gone from real life to the sim has struggled with. I feel like it is an advantage for me to go the opposite way, to go from the sim to the real car rather than vice versa. Because I remember even back to the eNASCAR Pro Invitational a couple of years ago on Fox Sports 1. It's funny watching the Cup drivers struggle at the iRacing stuff just because they lost that big sense of feedback for them. And I feel like we kind of have a head start because I already don't have that on the sim. So it's not like I've lost anything when I get into a real car. I've actually just gained an extra bit of feedback that I didn't previously have. So I feel like I have a leg up in that aspect.
Yeah, and talking about, of course, hopping over into the actual car itself, you've had some ARCA opportunities this year. We ran into you at IRP a few weeks ago. Kind of tell us about how this year has gone and what's next for you.
Yeah, I'm working right now on getting another getting another race deal in for the remainder of the year, and it's like a never-ending battle of finding sponsors and everything like that. It's tough, and it's one of the things that people don't really understand sometimes about racing is, we're entertainers first, and we market ourselves the best we can, and we're race car drivers second, because we can't drive race cars unless we have the sponsorship and the backing to drive the race car. So that's the biggest thing I'm working on right now. And I feel, like I said, completely comfortable in an ARCA car. So I feel like any opportunity I get, I can absolutely maximize and go above and beyond. But I'm working hard on it right now. I would say chances are very likely I will be back in an ARCA car before the end of the season, and then just building on doing even more next year. I'd like to go full time here eventually. I don't know if it'll be possible next year or not yet. Kind of too early to really know, but I'm working hard on it, and hopefully I can get something sorted with it.
Yeah, we certainly want to wish you luck in that. It is you're fighting an uphill battle when it comes to this. That's just the reality of it. Anyone who, is in a position where they don't come from money or a family background is facing an uphill battle with this, but it is certainly doable. And I think what you're doing is just proof of that it can happen as long as you're willing to put the work in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and that's something I've been doing this year. Is I've been working really hard at it, and it's kind of just a one man show. I don't, a lot of these drivers have huge marketing agencies working with them, and I come home from work and I sit on the phone for a couple hours and try to find what I can.
I always respect the grind with people like you, always working hard and just trying to make it, because there's so much out there, right? There's so many drivers looking for whatever they can to get behind the wheel of a race car because they love doing it, and I just respect that so much because again, I talk about especially from ARCA where there's just so many different drivers from so many different backgrounds who find this place to where they can have the opportunity to race on a national scale.
Yeah, and that's another cool thing about ARCA is like being able to race on TV on Fox Sports 1 and with the other big series the same weekend. Like that is so unique for someone, we have 16, 17, 18-year-olds running ARCA and I mean I'm 20. So to be able to run on like national TV like that, that is really awesome and there's not a lot of other racing series similar to ARCA in the world that can say that they do that.
Yeah, and I think it's good exposure too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the name of the game. You don't want to race something that doesn't have a broadcast because, there's no return on investment for your sponsors. They don't get anything out of it. You don't really get much out of it other than the racing aspect. So, there's tons of little intricate details that go into everything, and I'm happy to be racing in ARCA right now, and I think it's a great series.
Yeah, it's interesting because a little bit ago I had somebody ask me, like, why don't you focus more on running a late model right now than you do ARCA? And the reality is, with ARCA, there's so much more of a return on investment because these races are carried on Fox Sports One.
Yep.
So that's definitely going to carry a lot more weight when you're talking to sponsors, compared to running a late model race at Anderson Speedway or something like that, because they're really not televised, or if they are televised, it's to a much narrower audience. And when you have that FS1 coverage, you have a much more broad audience for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like you said, it's better for the sponsors, better for the driver, better for everyone involved. So I completely agree.
Yeah, and I gotta say, just out of curiosity, is there a certain track, like what would you say is your favorite track or tracks that you've raced on recently?
Oh, IRP. IRP fits my driving style so good. I want to go back there next year so bad. I think had our issue with the left front shock not happened this year, I think we would have been well on pace for somewhere between ninth and 12th. I think we had a decent shot at a top 10. I, you know, coulda, shoulda, wouldas are always there, and hindsight's 2020. But we were really starting to turn it up, and I, we had a long run car, and we never really got to a long run. Right as we started to get to the turning point, I was running my best laps of the race, and then the part broke, and into the wall I went. So IRP, the whole day I felt comfortable, and I really feel like my speed was getting there, and I had figured some things out too with just my line and how I was running, and I really think that we would have been on pace for a good finish. But
Mm.
IRP is for sure my favorite so far. I think that track just suits my driving style a lot. I like stuff that's tough to drive, and IRP, it's completely in the driver's hands. You gotta change up your line depending on the rubber. You gotta, you can run low, you can run high, you can move around quite a bit, and I think that really suits me pretty well.
Yeah, that is a fun little short track. I've enjoyed going there every time I go. And like you said, watching drivers change lines every lap, just everybody running a different line, a different groove. you know, it gives a bit of an unpredictability kind of thing in just watching lap after lap what's going to happen next. It is such a fun and a very historic place. So much history has happened at a track like IRP.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the technical aspect of driving it, I think it's just a really fun track to drive, produces great racing and my bias part in me, it's my home track, so I love it for that too.
Hey, that's fair. That's totally fair.
Hey, I'm just as biased as you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, you can't help it. And plus, Indiana, it's such a rich racing background. Not just IMS, but all the different short tracks and the dirt tracks that are all over the state. I've been to tracks like I mentioned, IRP. I've been to Kokomo a couple of times. I need to get out to Salem and Winchester. But again, there's just a lot of rich racing history in the Hoosier State for sure.
Yeah, and in my opinion, Indiana produces some of the best race car drivers out there. So
Absolutely.
I'm happy to be from Indiana and represent, my state. I have my name rail. My name rail has my state flag in it every race I run. So I'm very proud to be from Indiana, and there's a lot of great race car drivers that have come from the state.
Oh, absolutely. And talking about the short tracks, I kind of wanted to bring this up too because I just think this is really fascinating. So, Bristol Motor Speedway, it's Friday, August 9th. Bristol Motor Speedway announced they are hosting a Major League Baseball game next August. The game will be between the Atlanta Braves and the Cincinnati Reds, and I just think I love goofy stuff like that, and I think it's a good thing to showcase racing on a national level too, in a way, because Bristol, it is a very popular short track. It is called the last great Coliseum, and of course, I believe all of us here are Reds fans, so I just think it's even cooler. I think they got the two right teams involved for that, and I just wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on a place like Bristol hosting something that's not racing? It's a baseball game.
I mean, I think it's awesome. I think it'll draw a really good crowd. I think it's great for both sports. I think it's great for MLB. I think it's great for NASCAR, because it really works hand in hand to benefit them both. And I'm pretty sure I saw as well that it's going to be the first ever MLB game in Tennessee ever. So I think that's pretty cool as well. So, it's not something that you're probably going to see many more times. I doubt they'll do it like every year.
Right.
I think it's probably a one and done type thing where they're going to do it and say that they did it, and it'll be a really cool event, and then it'll probably never happen again, or at least not at Bristol. So it is nice to see that the track down there, Bristol, they're willing to make those crazy announcements and do these outlandish activities because they have Monster Jam down there still, I think, and they had a football game down there a couple of years ago, I believe.
Yep.
So it's nice that a small track like that, which you wouldn't think a track Bristol size could even pull that stuff off, but it's nice to see that they do. And even the dirt race, I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but it is cool that they went out of their way to try it. And I think a lot of other tracks, you probably wouldn't see that risk being taken. So I'll be interested to see how it does. I'd love to go to it. I don't know if it would be possible or not, but I'll definitely watch it nonetheless.
Yeah, most certainly. If you probably asked me like even like a year ago, like, hey, do you think a baseball game could happen at a place like Bristol? I'm like, I don't know how that's going to work. But then again, if NASCAR can fit a racetrack inside the Los Angeles Coliseum, then hey, anything's possible, right? So, it's cool. And I know, like another example is I know the Jacksonville Jaguars were talking about playing at Daytona. Um, probably not going to happen, but because they want to renovate their current stadium. But it's cool seeing tracks trying these sorts of different things, and I think it puts them on a good national scale, and it gives them good recognition for sure.
Yeah, I agree, and I hope more tracks and sports continue to do that in the future because I think it's good for all parties.
Yeah, and it's a way of just creating more innovation as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not something that you're going to see every day. So I know I'd seen a couple rumors of it the last few days, and I thought, I'm not sure if that's going to be true or not. But Sure enough, it was. So I'll be interested to see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm already planning the road trip right now.
Yeah, I think you and John probably want to go. I know my roommates probably want to go, so it's like we're going to be a big group just heading down there. I work at a TV station, so we were talking about that on the news today, and obviously they know I'm a big NASCAR guy, so they're like, this is pretty cool, just seeing all this, and some of those guys, not all of them know much about racing, so they're always asking me about, like, you know, current things going on in the sport, and just me talking about Bristol and everything else. It was cool. Kind of puts a smile on my face too whenever racing gets talked about, even if it's like a track hosting a different kind of a sport. So it's really unique for sure.
Yeah, and whenever you can hear your non-racing friends mention racing, you're like, oh wow, that's really neat. So I feel like that'll be an event that really does do that for people.
Well, Michael, is there anything else you wanted to ask or add on?
Honestly, I think I'm good.
Okay.
Alex, is there anything you wanted to add on?
Yeah, we'll just close things out with if there's anyone you want to thank in particular or anyone you want to give a shout out to.
Yeah, I mean, first off, thank you guys for having me on tonight, and you know, shout out to all my partners. I know like Tatanka Sauce, they've been a really, really big partner of mine this year, and they produce some of the best hot sauce out there. So shout out to them. Shout out to the Landcoin podcast, Runnings Racing Designs, B Blaze Vintage, Fast Track Racing, Club Racing Inc., Wayne Peterson, obviously for all of those guys letting me drive their cars this year. And yeah, I'm really excited for the future. I think there's a lot of cool things in the works, and I'm certainly working hard at it.
Excellent. Well, Presley, thank you so much for taking the time to joining us here today. It's a pleasure having you on. And with that being said, we'll go ahead and wrap things up here for episode 1 of Speed Rating Supreme. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to check out our previous episode as well, episode 00 with Tim Goulet of Rice Motorsports. With that being said, from Michael Klein, Presley Sorah, and myself, I'm Alex Gray signing off, and we'll see you next time.